The obsidian peak clearing shimmered beneath the full moon's silver judgment. Circea Wren stood among the gathered packs, her heart a fragile thing wrapped in years of unspoken promises. She'd grown up in Draconis' shadow, watching him become the fearsome Alpha King while she remained the quiet wolf at the edges of his world. But tonight the mating ceremony would finally bind what had always been inevitable. The moment Alpha King Draconis Sanguine turned his burning gaze toward her, the mate bond surged, a violent, sacred current that made the glowing mark on her neck pulse with radiant blue light. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The mark of a true fated mate was rare, precious, undeniable. Circea stepped forward, trembling but hopeful, believing this was the destiny she'd been promised since childhood. Draconis stood on the elevated stone platform, his dark hair catching moonlight, his expression unreadable. For one breathless moment, Circea thought she saw recognition in his eyes. Then his lip curled. "I, Alpha King Draconis Sanguine," his voice rang out, amplified by his authority, "publicly reject you, Circea Wren, as my fated mate." The words struck like a physical blow. The glowing mark on her neck flared with blinding pain, then flickered as if dying. Circea's knees buckled, and she hit the ground hard, the spiritual agony tearing through her soul like claws ripping flesh from bone. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The sacred bond that had just ignited was now shattering, splintering into 1,000 burning fragments inside her chest. "You are unworthy," Draconis continued, his voice cold and final. A burden to the throne, weak, unsuitable. Through the haze of pain, Circea watched him descend the platform. He walked past her crumpled form without a glance and extended his hand to someone else. Eulalie Sparrow stepped forward, her dark eyes gleaming with something that wasn't quite surprise. Circea's friend, her closest companion since childhood, took Draconis' hand with a smile that was all triumph. "I choose Eulalie Sparrow as my Luna," Draconis declared, pulling Eulalie into his embrace. "She is strong, she is worthy. She will stand beside me as this pack deserves." The assembled wolves erupted into uncertain murmurs. A few cheered, most simply stared. Circea tried to rise, but her body wouldn't obey. The mark on her neck had gone dark, leaving only a faint throbbing ache where the light had been. Eulalie looked down at her, and for just a moment, their eyes met. There was no remorse in her friend's gaze, only cold calculation. Then the ground trembled. It started as a vibration beneath Circea's palms, spreading through the earth like the approach of something massive and ancient. The wolves fell silent. The air itself seemed to thicken, tasting of ozone and death and power so old it predated the packs themselves. Circea's mark suddenly blazed back to life, not blue this time, but molten gold, burning hotter and brighter than before. A figure emerged from the tree line, and every wolf in the clearing dropped their gaze instinctively. Even Draconis took an involuntary step back. Lycan King Zadkiel Bane stepped into the moonlight. He was taller than any wolf present, his presence a physical weight that pressed against every living thing in the clearing. Long dark hair framed a face carved from brutal beauty and ancient violence. A thin scar crossed near his eye, and his golden amber gaze burned with supernatural fury as it locked onto Circea. The elaborate silver crown on his head caught the moonlight, sharp and angular, a declaration of dominion that needed no words. Zadkiel moved with predatory grace, each step deliberate, his heavy, dark red cloak billowing behind him. He stopped directly in front of Circea's broken form and crouched, his enormous hand reaching out to tilt her chin up. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but the power radiating from him made her tremble. "This mark," he said, his voice a low growl that seemed to resonate in her bones, "belongs to me." "You have no claim here, Lycan King," Draconis snarled, though his voice lacked conviction. "This is Alpha territory. She is mine." Zadkiel didn't even look at him. His golden eyes remained fixed on Circea, studying the blazing mark on her neck with something like reverence. "The goddess has chosen. Anyone who denies this gift will answer to me." He stood, lifting Circea effortlessly into his arms, as if she weighed nothing. The moment he touched her fully, the pain vanished, replaced by a rush of overwhelming power that stole her breath. The mark on her neck burned with golden light, and she felt it, the true mate bond, ancient and absolute, clicking into place like a key in a lock she hadn't known existed. "Wait," Circea's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You will not speak." Zadkiel said, not unkindly, but with absolute authority. You are in shock, you are injured, and you are coming with me. Draconis moved forward, rage contorting his features. You cannot simply— Zadkiel's growl cut him off, a sound so primal and terrifying that several wolves shifted involuntarily, their animal instincts screaming danger. I am Lycan King, I do as I will. Challenge me, and I will paint this clearing with your blood. No one moved, no one dared. Zadkiel turned and walked back toward the tree line, Circea cradled against his chest, her glowing mark lighting their path. Behind them, Draconis stood frozen, his chosen Luna at his side, watching the woman he'd rejected disappear into the darkness with a power he could never hope to match. The last thing Circea saw before the shadows swallowed them was Eulalie's face, twisted with an expression that might have been envy or fury or fear. Then the forest closed around them, and her old life ended. The Lycan stronghold rose from the mountains like a crown of blackened iron and ancient stone. Circea had heard stories of this place, the Bloodstone Citadel, a fortress so old that even the elders spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones. She'd imagined it would be magnificent. She hadn't imagined it would be so profoundly terrifying. Zadkiel carried her through towering gates carved with runes that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. The wolves, no, Lycans, that lined their path were different from any she'd known, larger, deadlier. Their eyes tracked her with predatory focus, and she could feel their disdain like a physical pressure against her skin. The mark on her neck still glowed faintly, a beacon that announced her presence to everyone they passed. They hate me, Circea whispered against Zadkiel's chest. They fear change, he replied, his voice a low rumble. You represent both opportunity and threat. They will adjust. He said it with such casual certainty, as if their hatred was merely an inconvenience to be managed rather than a danger to her life. Perhaps to him, it was. They entered the great hall, and Circea's breath caught. The space was cavernous, lit by massive braziers that cast dancing shadows across walls, adorned with weapons and banners from 1,000 conquered territories. At the far end, a circle of figures waited. 7 ancient Lycans, their power palpable even from this distance, the elders. Zadkiel finally set Circea on her feet, though he kept one hand at the small of her back. A claim and a warning. She swayed slightly, still weak from the broken alpha bond, but forced herself to stand straight. The glowing mark pulsed against her neck, and she saw every elder's gaze drawn to it with expressions ranging from fascination to barely concealed disgust. My king, the center elder spoke, a woman with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. You bring alpha blood into our sacred hall. I bring my fated queen, Zadkiel corrected, his tone brooking no argument. The mark has chosen, the goddess has spoken. The mark is corrupted, another elder spat, a massive male with scars covering half his face. She reeks of alpha weakness, her bloodline is contaminated. This is an abomination. Circea flinched, but Zadkiel's hand tightened against her back, a silent command to remain still. Elder Corvus, Zadkiel's voice dropped to a dangerous purr. Choose your next words carefully. You speak of my mate, my queen, insult her again, and I will demonstrate exactly how contaminated her power truly is. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Corvus's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. The silver-haired elder, Elder Moira, Circea remembered from stories, stepped forward, her gaze calculating. The girl is marked, this is true, but marked does not mean worthy. Our bloodline has remained pure for 3,000 years, my king. To introduce alpha weakness into the royal line could destroy everything our ancestors built. Then test her, Zadkiel said simply. Put her through your trials, prove her worthy or unworthy. But know this, his voice hardened to steel, she is mine. The bond is sealed. If you find her unworthy and demand her death, you will have to go through me first. The declaration sent shock rippling through the assembled Lycans. Several elders exchanged glances. Elder Moira's expression remained unreadable. Very well, she said finally. The girl will be tested. If she survives, we will acknowledge her claim. If she fails, the elder let the implication hang. She will not fail, Zadkiel stated, turning to face Circea fully for the first time since they'd entered. His golden eyes burned into hers, and she saw something in their depths that made her breath catch. not gentleness, but absolute, unshakable certainty. "Will you, Circea Wren?" It wasn't really a question. It was a command wrapped in the illusion of choice. "No," Circea heard herself say, though her voice trembled. "I will not fail." Something that might have been approval flickered across Zadkiel's scarred face. He turned back to the elders, dismissing them with a gesture. "Then we are finished here. My queen requires rest. We will begin her training at dawn." He guided Circea away from the great hall, through winding corridors of stone and shadow. She could feel eyes watching from every darkened alcove, hear whispers following in their wake. The Lycans were already talking, already plotting. She was an outsider, an interloper, a threat to their precious pure bloodline. Zadkiel led her to a chamber that was both magnificent and austere, rich furs covering a massive bed, weapons adorning the walls, a fireplace large enough to roast a whole deer. It was clearly his personal quarters, her new prison. "You will stay here," he said, moving to pour something amber into a crystal glass. "With me, under my protection. The alternative is death before morning." Circea's legs finally gave out, and she sank onto the edge of the bed. The enormity of what had happened crashed over her. Rejected, claimed, stolen away to a place where everyone wanted her dead. She looked up at Zadkiel, this terrifying stranger who now held her fate in his scarred hands. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me? You could have any—" "The mark chose you," Zadkiel interrupted, handing her the glass. His fingers brushed hers, and the touch sent that same overwhelming surge of power through her veins. "I do not question the goddess. I do not question fate. You are mine because you were always meant to be mine." He paused, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Drink. It will help with the pain." Circea obeyed, the liquid burning down her throat, but immediately dulling the lingering ache from the broken alpha bond. Zadkiel watched her with those unrelenting golden eyes, and she realized with a strange, hollow certainty that this was her life now. Not the gentle acceptance she'd dreamed of with Draconis, but this. Raw power, constant danger, and a mate who looked at her like she was simultaneously the most precious and most dangerous thing he'd ever possessed. "Sleep," Zadkiel commanded, moving toward the chamber door. "Tomorrow you learn what it means to be a Lycan queen. Tomorrow you learn to survive." He left without another word, and Circea was alone in the darkness, the glowing mark on her neck the only light, pulsing steadily like a second heartbeat, a reminder that she no longer belonged to herself. She belonged to him. Draconis Sanguine hadn't slept in 3 days. He stood at the window of his private chambers, staring out at the obsidian peak clearing, where everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. The moon still hung fat and bright in the sky, mocking him. His hand gripped the stone windowsill hard enough that his knuckles had gone white, hard enough that cracks were beginning to spiderweb through the ancient rock. Behind him, Eulalie moved through the room with the confidence of a woman who'd finally claimed what she believed was rightfully hers. She wore the Luna's ceremonial silver now, the metal glinting as she poured wine into 2 goblets. Her reflection in the dark glass showed satisfaction. But Draconis couldn't bring himself to look at her directly. Every time he did, all he saw was what he'd lost. "You need to eat something," Eulalie said, her voice carrying that particular tone of wifely concern that set his teeth on edge. "The pack is watching. They need to see their alpha king strong, not brooding like—" "Do you know what I felt?" Draconis interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "When the Lycan king touched her?" Eulalie went still, the wine bottle hovering over the second goblet. "I felt the bond," Draconis continued, finally turning to face her. His eyes blazed with something wild and desperate. "The real bond. Not the pathetic thread I thought we had, Eulalie. Not the political alliance I convinced myself was enough. I felt the true mate bond snap into place between them. And it was like watching the sun itself choose another man." "She was weak," Eulalie said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "You said so yourself. Unsuitable for— I was a fool." The admission came out like broken glass. Draconis moved toward her, and she actually took a step back. That mark on her neck. Do you understand what it means? A true fated mate bond is rare, Eulalie. 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. And when it's claimed by a Lycan king, he laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. That's power, real power, the kind that could unite the entire continent under one rule. Then it's good she's gone, Eulalie said quickly, desperately. She's with the Lycans now, she's their problem. We have everything we wanted. You're Alpha King, I'm Luna, the pack is strong. The pack is whispering. Draconis cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. They saw what happened. They felt it. Every wolf in that clearing knows I rejected my true mate for a political convenience. Do you know what that makes me, Eulalie? Weak. The very thing I accused Circea of being. Eulalie's face flushed with anger. I am not a political convenience. We've been planning this for years. Since we were children, you promised me. I promised you nothing. The words struck like a physical blow, and Eulalie recoiled as if slapped. You convinced yourself of a future that never existed. I tolerated your presence because you were useful, because you pushed Circea aside when I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. Too blind? Eulalie's voice rose, sharp with fury and hurt. I did everything for you, everything. I trained harder, fought better, made myself indispensable while she just existed, and somehow that was enough for everyone to love her. The overlooked wolf, the gentle soul. She spat the words like poison. Well, she's gone now. She's in the Bloodstone Citadel with that monster, and knowing the Lycan elders, she'll be dead within the month. Something dangerous flickered across Draconis' face. What did you say? The elders won't accept alpha blood in their precious pure line, Eulalie continued, her lips curving into something cruel. Everyone knows that. They'll test her, break her, and when she fails, because she will fail, they'll execute her. Problem solved. Unless she doesn't fail, Draconis said slowly, his mind racing. Unless Zadkiel protects her. Unless she survives and becomes exactly what that mark promised. A queen powerful enough to make the Lycan king himself bend the knee to fate. Eulalie's eyes narrowed. You want her back? I want what's mine. Draconis moved to his weapons rack, running his fingers over the hilts of various blades. That bond should have been mine. That power should have been mine. She should have been mine. She rejected you the moment Zadkiel touched her, Eulalie hissed. I saw her face. She didn't fight him, didn't even hesitate. She was in shock. But even as Draconis said it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. He'd seen something in Circea's eyes in those final moments. A flash of recognition, of belonging, that had never appeared when she looked at him. The realization sat in his gut like poison. Eulalie watched him for a long moment, her expression shifting through several emotions before settling on something cold and calculating. What if she didn't survive the month? Draconis turned sharply. What? The elders might test her, but tests can be failed in more ways than one. Eulalie moved closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Accidents happen. Assassins slip through. If Circea were to die before she could fully claim her position, the bond would break. Zadkiel would be vulnerable. And you? She reached up to touch his face, her fingers trailing along his jaw. You would be the strongest alpha in the realm. No rivals, no regrets. Draconis caught her wrist, his grip just shy of painful. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about survival. Eulalie's eyes gleamed with something feverish and desperate. She's a threat to everything we've built, to us. Every moment she lives in that citadel, she grows stronger. The longer Zadkiel keeps her alive, the more likely it becomes that she'll return. Not as the weak wolf you rejected, but as a Lycan queen with an army at her back. What do you think she'll do then, Draconis? Forgive you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Draconis released Eulalie's wrist and turned away, his mind a storm of regret and rage and bitter, burning ambition. He'd made a catastrophic error. He'd thrown away his true mate for a woman who now spoke casually of assassination, and the worst part was, the absolutely worst part was, he was actually considering it. I have contacts, Eulalie continued, sensing his hesitation. Wolves who've infiltrated the Lycan territories as servants, spies. One of them could easily slip something into her food. A blade in the dark, she wouldn't even see it coming. And if Zadkiel discovers it was us? Draconis asked quietly. He won't. Not until it's too late. Eulalie moved to stand beside him at the window, looking out at the clearing where everything had changed. Trust me, my king, this is the only way. She's too dangerous to live. Draconis said nothing for a long time, his reflection in the glass showing a man he barely recognized. Haunted, desperate, consumed by a jealousy that burned hotter than any mate bond. Finally, he nodded, the movement barely perceptible. "Do it," he whispered. "But make it look like the Elder's doing. Make it look like she simply wasn't strong enough to survive their tests." Eulalie smiled. And it was the smile of a woman who'd finally secured her position by ensuring her rival would never threaten it again. "Consider it done." As she left to make her dark arrangements, Draconis remained at the window, staring at the moon and wondering if the hollow ache in his chest was regret or if he'd simply lost the capacity to feel anything genuine at all. Somewhere in the mountains, Circea was probably sleeping in Zadkiel's chambers, marked and claimed and utterly beyond his reach. Unless Eulalie succeeded. Unless the gentle wolf he'd rejected proved as weak as he'd claimed. But deep in his bones, in the part of him that still remembered the blinding flash of her true mate bond, Draconis suspected he'd already lost something far more valuable than a kingdom. He'd lost his soul. The training yard was brutal. Circea hit the ground for the 7th time, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Her entire body screamed in protest, bruises layering on bruises from the past 3 days of what Zadkiel called basic preparation. Above her, the Lycan king stood with his arms crossed, his golden eyes showing no sympathy. "Again," he commanded. "I can't," Circea gasped, tasting copper. "I need, again." His voice dropped to that dangerous purr that brooked no argument. "Your enemies will not wait for you to catch your breath. The elders will not pause their tests because you're tired, again." Circea forced herself to her feet, her legs shaking. They'd been at this since before dawn. Combat training, endurance drills, lessons in channeling power she didn't even know she possessed. Zadkiel was relentless, pushing her past every limit she thought she had, then pushing harder. "You're holding back," he observed, circling her like a predator. "Why?" "I'm not." "You are." He moved with blinding speed, and suddenly he was behind her, his chest pressed against her back, his hand covering the glowing mark on her neck. The moment he touched it, power surged through her, raw, overwhelming, intoxicating. "Feel that? That's barely a fraction of what you're capable of. You're afraid of it." "It's too much," Circea whispered, trembling under the onslaught of sensation. The mark burned beneath his palm, and she could feel something ancient stirring in her blood, something that had been sleeping her entire life. "It's exactly enough." Zadkiel's breath was warm against her ear. "You think you're just an alpha wolf who happened to catch a Lycan king's eye? You're wrong. That mark didn't appear by accident, Circea. It's been dormant in your bloodline for generations, waiting for the right trigger." "What are you saying?" She turned to face him, and he allowed it, though his hand remained on her neck, maintaining that connection. "I'm saying you have Lycan blood, old blood, the kind that hasn't manifested in the alpha packs for over 300 years. His golden eyes studied her with something between fascination and possessiveness. "Your ancestors were Lycan, before the Great Separation, before the packs split and the bloodlines diverged. Somewhere in your family tree, a Lycan queen walked among the alphas, and her power has been sleeping in your veins ever since." The revelation stole her breath. "That's impossible. I would have felt—" "You felt nothing because it needed the right catalyst to awaken." Zadkiel's thumb traced the glowing mark, sending shivers down her spine. "Me, my claim. The true mate bond triggered what was always meant to be. You're not just my mate, Circea. You're my equal, a queen in truth, not just title." "The elders will never accept that," Circea said. But something fierce was kindling in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "The elders will accept what I tell them to accept." Zadkiel's hand slid from her neck to her chin, tilting her face up. "But first you need to believe it yourself. You need to stop seeing yourself as the weak wolf Draconis rejected, and start seeing yourself as what you actually are, the most dangerous woman in this realm." "I don't feel dangerous," Circea admitted. "I feel terrified." "Good." Something that might have been approval flickered across his scarred face. "Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you become careless." Now, he stepped back, resuming his defensive stance. "Show me your power. Not your alpha strength. Your true power. Reach for the mark. Let it guide you." Circea closed her eyes, feeling for the connection he'd described. The mark pulsed against her neck, warm and alive, and when she focused on it, she felt something vast and ancient respond. Power flooded her veins, different from anything she'd felt before. Not the straightforward strength of her alpha blood, but something more primal, more elemental. Her eyes snapped open, and she knew without looking that they were glowing the same molten gold as Zadkiel's. "There you are," he murmured, and his voice held something like reverence. Circea moved without thinking, her body responding to instincts she hadn't known she possessed. She was faster now, stronger, her reflexes sharp as broken glass. When Zadkiel struck, she didn't just block, she countered, driving him back 3 steps before he caught her wrist and twisted. They grappled, and for the first time, she felt like an actual challenge rather than a novice he was tolerating. "Yes," Zadkiel growled, and she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Exactly like that. Don't think. Just be." They fought until Circea's muscles burned and her breath came in ragged gasps. But this time when she hit the ground, Zadkiel came down with her, pinning her with his weight. His face was inches from hers, both of them breathing hard, and the air between them crackled with more than just exertion. "You're learning," he said, his voice rough. "Faster than I expected." "Maybe I had the right teacher," Circea replied, surprised by her own boldness. Something dangerous and hungry flashed in Zadkiel's eyes. His hand came up to cup her face, and the touch was gentler than she thought him capable of. "This bond between us," he said quietly. "It's not just power, it's everything. When you hurt, I feel it. When you're threatened, my instinct is to destroy anything that even looks at you wrong. And when you finally accept what you are," he leaned closer, his lips barely brushing the mark on her neck. "When you stop fighting your destiny and embrace it fully, we will be unstoppable." The kiss he pressed to her mark sent lightning through her entire body. Circea arched beneath him, the power surging between them so intense it was almost painful. She could feel his absolute claim on her, his unwavering certainty, and for the first time since the rejection, she felt something other than fear. She felt powerful. Zadkiel pulled back, his eyes blazing. "Tomorrow we train with weapons. The day after, you'll face your first elder trial. They'll try to break you, Circea. They'll push you until you shatter." "Then I won't shatter," Circea said, and this time her voice was steady. "No," Zadkiel agreed, helping her to her feet. "You won't. Because you're mine, and nothing that belongs to me is permitted to break." As they walked back toward the citadel, Circea felt the mark pulse with warmth, felt the power settling into her bones like it had always belonged there. The gentle, overlooked wolf was dying. In her place, something fiercer was being born, something that might actually deserve the title of queen. The poison was meant to be tasteless. Circea realized this only after she'd taken 3 sips of the ceremonial wine, felt the burning spread through her chest, and watched the serving girl's face go white with terror. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, her hands shaking as she dropped the silver pitcher, the remaining liquid splashing across the stone floor like spilled blood. "Run," Circea whispered, her throat already closing. "Please, just—" The doors exploded inward before the girl could move. Zadkiel entered like a storm-given flesh, his power preceding him in a wave that drove everyone in the chamber to their knees. Everyone except Circea, who was collapsing for entirely different reasons. He caught her before she hit the ground, his golden eyes blazing with a fury so absolute it seemed to darken the very air. "Who?" The single word came out as a growl that made the serving girl sob. "I don't know," the girl stammered, tears streaming down her face. "A woman, she paid me, said it would just make the Luna sick, not— I didn't know it was poison, I swear, I didn't—" Zadkiel's roar cut her off, a sound of pure primal rage that shook the foundations of the citadel. Circea felt him press his hand to her throat, felt the mark flare to life with searing heat, and suddenly the poison was burning away. Consumed by the bond's power, she gasped, her vision clearing, her lungs filling with blessed air. "You're alive," Zadkiel said, and his voice held something between relief and murder. "You're alive, and someone in my court tried to take you from me." "She's just a child," Circea managed, looking at the terrified serving girl. She poisoned my mate." Zadkiel stood, still cradling Circea against his chest, his attention now fixed on the girl with predatory focus. "That is treason. That is death." Guards flooded the chamber, dragging the sobbing girl to her feet. She was begging now, pleading for mercy, explaining through tears about the woman who'd approached her, promised gold, threatened her family if she refused. But Zadkiel's expression remained carved from ice. "Take her to the judgment hall," he commanded. "Assemble the court. Everyone will witness what happens to those who threaten their queen. No, Circea said, her voice still hoarse but steady. Wait. Zadkiel looked down at her, surprise flickering across his features. What? Let me speak with her. Circea pushed gently at his chest, and after a moment's hesitation he set her on her feet, though he kept one hand at her waist. Please. She approached the girl, who was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Up close, Circea could see she was even younger than she'd thought, her face still holding traces of childhood softness beneath the terror. What's your name? Circea asked gently. Mira, the girl whispered. Mira, look at me. Circea waited until the girl's tear-filled eyes met hers. Tell me the truth. Did you know it would kill me? No, Mira sobbed. I swear on the goddess, no. The woman said it would just make you ill enough that you'd be sent away, that you'd go back to your alpha pack and everything would return to normal. She said no one would be hurt. What did this woman look like? Dark hair, beautiful, cold eyes. She wore fine clothes but covered her face with a hood. Mira swallowed hard. She knew things about my family, about my little brother. She said if I didn't help her, he would have an accident. Circea's chest tightened. This was Eulalie's doing. It had to be. The description matched, and the tactics were exactly like her former friend. Manipulate the vulnerable, use their fear, make them complicit in something they'd never choose freely. She turned back to Zadkiel, whose expression remained merciless. She was coerced. She's a victim, not a traitor. She delivered poison to your lips, Zadkiel said flatly. Her motivation is irrelevant. The law is clear. Then change the law. Circea straightened, feeling the mark pulse with power. You're the king. You have that authority. And you think mercy is wisdom? Zadkiel's voice dropped dangerously low. You think showing compassion to those who would kill you makes you strong? I think showing mercy to those who deserve it makes me just, Circea countered. This girl is not our enemy. The woman who manipulated her is. Execute Mira, and you send a message that even coercion is unforgivable. Spare her, and you send a message that your queen has the strength to distinguish between malice and manipulation. The chamber had gone deadly silent. The guards watched with barely concealed shock, clearly expecting their king to dismiss his mate's plea and proceed with execution. Even Mira had stopped crying, her eyes wide with desperate hope. Zadkiel stared at Circea for a long moment, something complex and unreadable moving behind his golden eyes. Finally he spoke, his voice carrying through the chamber. The girl lives, but she will give us every detail about this woman, her voice, her mannerisms, anything that might identify her. And she will remain under guard until we're certain she poses no further threat. Relief flooded through Circea, so intense it made her dizzy. She looked at Mira, who had collapsed to her knees, sobbing with gratitude. Thank you, the girl whispered. Thank you, my queen. As the guards led Mira away, gently this time, Zadkiel pulled Circea aside. His expression dark. You realize what you've done? Shown mercy to someone who deserved it, Circea said, though her voice wavered slightly under his intense gaze. You've shown the court that you can be manipulated through compassion. Zadkiel's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. That is dangerous, Circea. Our enemies will use that against you. Our enemies already tried to use an innocent girl against me, Circea countered. I won't let them turn me into something I'm not. If being queen means losing every shred of compassion, then maybe I don't want. Zadkiel kissed her, hard and possessive and utterly silencing. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. You will be queen, but we will find a balance between your mercy and the ruthlessness you need to survive. Starting now, he turned to address the gathered crowd. Whoever orchestrated this attack has made an enemy of the Lycan throne. When we find them, and we will find them, their death will serve as a reminder that my mate is not the weak target they believe her to be. As they left the chamber, Zadkiel kept Circea close, his hand possessive at her waist. You challenged me in front of the court, he said quietly. I did, Circea admitted, her heart pounding. Good. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. A true queen should never be afraid to challenge even her king when she believes she's right. But Circea, his expression turned serious again. The next time someone tries to kill you, I may not be so easily swayed. Some mercy is strength, too much is suicide. Circea nodded, understanding the weight of what he was saying. She'd won this battle, saved an innocent life, but she'd also exposed something vulnerable in herself. In this world of predators and power, compassion was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. She would have to learn when to show mercy and when to show fangs. But for now, looking up at Zadkiel's scarred face and seeing something like respect in his golden eyes, she thought maybe, just maybe, she was learning to be both the gentle wolf and the fierce queen. The library was a cathedral of forgotten knowledge. Circea had discovered it by accident on her 5th day at the Citadel, while trying to navigate the labyrinthine corridors without getting lost. Ancient texts lined walls that stretched up 3 stories, illuminated by shafts of moonlight through stained glass windows depicting Lycan history in violent, beautiful detail. She'd been coming here every night since, when Zadkiel was occupied with court matters and the weight of hostile Lycan eyes became too much to bear. Tonight, she'd found something that made her blood run cold. The book was old, older than anything else in the collection, its leather binding cracked and pages yellowed with age. She'd pulled it from the shelf almost randomly, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name. The title was written in an ancient dialect she barely recognized. Prophecies of the Moon Touched Queens. Her hands trembled as she translated the words, her knowledge of old languages, a hobby she'd pursued in her quieter life, finally proving useful. The prophecy was clear, terrifyingly clear. When the bloodlines split and the packs divide, the goddess will hide her chosen seed. 3 centuries will pass in darkness and war, until the alpha wolf carries Lycan power once more. The king will know her by the mark that burns, the ancient bond that finally returns. She will unite what was torn asunder, or watch the realm fall to blood and thunder. Circea read it 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each pass. This was about her, the mark, the hidden Lycan bloodline. Zadkiel's certainty that she was more than just his mate. It was all here, written generations ago, waiting for someone to understand. You should not be here alone, she spun, the book nearly falling from her hands. Zadkiel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the shadows. How long had he been watching? I found something, Circea said, her voice barely above a whisper. She held out the book. A prophecy, about me. About us. Zadkiel approached slowly, taking the ancient text from her hands. His eyes scanned the passage, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, but not surprise. You already knew, Circea breathed. You knew about this. I suspected, Zadkiel admitted, setting the book aside. The elders have fragments of this prophecy, pieces scattered across different texts, most of them dismissed as myth. But when I saw your mark ignite, when I felt the bond, I knew it was real. Why didn't you tell me? There was no accusation in her voice, only confusion, because you needed to discover it yourself. You needed to believe in your own power before you could understand the weight of what you're meant to do. Zadkiel's hand came up to touch the glowing mark on her neck, his expression softening. Unite the packs, Circea. Alpha and Lycan, and 3 centuries of separation and distrust. That is your destiny. That is why the goddess chose you. The enormity of it crashed over her like a wave. Not just survival, not just proving herself to the elders. She was meant to fundamentally reshape their entire world. I don't know if I can. You can. Zadkiel's certainty was absolute. You already are. Every day you survive here, every time you show them strength and mercy in equal measure, you prove that Alpha and Lycan can coexist. You prove that the old divisions are meaningless. A sound echoed through the library, footsteps, multiple pairs, approaching with purpose. Zadkiel moved instantly, positioning himself between Circea and the door, his body a wall of protection. But it wasn't assassins who entered. It was a messenger, wearing the colors of the Alpha Packs. Forgive the intrusion, my king, the young wolf said, bowing deeply. But Alpha King Draconis Sanguine has sent a formal communication for Lady Circea. He requests an audience. Circea's breath caught. Zadkiel's entire body went rigid, his power filling the room like a living thing. Draconis has no right to request anything concerning my mate. He claims right of previous bond, the messenger said carefully, his eyes on the floor. He wishes to speak with Lady Circea about an error in judgment. His words, my king. An error in judgment, Zadkiel repeated, his voice deadly soft. He publicly rejected her, chose another, and now decides it was an error? The messenger wisely said nothing. Circea's mind raced. Draconis wanted to speak with her. After everything, the rejection, the humiliation, the spiritual agony, he wanted to communicate. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately, to let Zadkiel send the messenger away with threats. But another part, the part that was learning to be queen, recognized an opportunity. "I'll hear what he has to say," Circea said quietly. Zadkiel turned to her, his golden eyes blazing. "Absolutely not." "He can't hurt me now," Circea said, meeting his gaze. "I'm bonded to you. The mark is sealed. Whatever he wants to say, whatever game he's playing, I need to hear it. I need to understand what I'm facing." "What you're facing is a desperate, obsessed alpha who realizes too late that he discarded a treasure," Zadkiel growled. "He will try to manipulate you, sow doubt, make you question everything between us." "Then let him try." Circea placed her hand over Zadkiel's heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. "I'm not the same wolf he rejected. I'm stronger now. And if he has information about the assassination attempt, about Eulalie's involvement, we need to know." Zadkiel stared at her for a long moment, clearly warring with every possessive protective instinct he had. Finally, he turned to the messenger. "Tell Draconis he may send a written correspondence, under guard, to be read in my presence. Those are the terms. He accepts, or he gets nothing." The messenger bowed and hurried away. When they were alone again, Zadkiel pulled Circea against him, his hand tangling in her hair. "If he tries anything, he won't," Circea said, though she wasn't entirely sure she believed it. "And even if he does, I have you." "You do," Zadkiel agreed, his voice rough with possession. "You have me, Circea. Completely. Irrevocably. No matter what poison Draconis tries to pour in your ears, remember that." She nodded against his chest, but as they left the library together, the prophecy's words echoed in her mind. Unite the packs. End the separation. She was meant to bridge two worlds that had been at odds for centuries. And somehow, she suspected, Draconis' desperate attempt to communicate was only the beginning of something far more complicated and dangerous than a simple plea for forgiveness. The storm was coming. She could feel it gathering like pressure before lightning strikes. She just hoped she'd be strong enough to weather it. The war horn sounded at dawn. Circea woke to chaos, Lycans rushing through corridors, armor clanking, weapons being distributed with brutal efficiency. Zadkiel was already dressed for battle, his dark armor making him look even more terrifying than usual, the silver crown replaced with a war helm that cast shadows across his scarred face. "What's happening?" Circea demanded, pulling on her robe. "Draconis," Zadkiel said, his voice like grinding stone. "He's brought an army to our borders, claims he's here to rescue you from captivity." The bitter laugh that followed held no humor. "The fool thinks he can take you from me." Circea's blood ran cold. This was exactly what she'd feared, Draconis' obsession spiraling into something catastrophic. "How many?" 500 alpha wolves, well-armed, well-trained. Zadkiel fastened his weapon belt, the movement sharp with controlled rage. "He sent a formal declaration, says you're being held against your will, that I've corrupted you with dark magic, that the mate bond is a lie." "That's insane," Circea breathed. "He has to know." A runner burst into the chamber, breathless and pale. "My king, there's been a message, from inside our walls." He held out a sealed letter, his hand shaking. It was found in the queen's chambers, in her personal belongings. Zadkiel took the letter, and Circea watched his expression shift from fury to something far more dangerous, cold, calculating suspicion. He read in silence, his jaw clenching tighter with each word. When he finally looked at her, his golden eyes held something she'd never seen before, doubt. "What does it say?" Circea asked, though dread was already coiling in her stomach. Zadkiel handed her the letter. The words swam before her eyes, but their meaning was devastatingly clear. It was written in her handwriting, or a perfect forgery of it, addressed to Draconis. It spoke of regret, of being trapped, of the Lycan bond being forced upon her. It begged him to come for her, to free her, to help her escape the monster who'd stolen her. "I didn't write this," Circea said immediately, her voice shaking. "Zadkiel, I swear on the goddess, I never—" "It's your hand," he interrupted, his voice carefully neutral. "Your phrasing, even small details only you would know." "It's a forgery." Circea moved toward him, but he stepped back, and that single movement broke something in her chest. Eulalie, this has to be Eulalie. She's been planning this from the beginning, the poison, the assassination attempt, and now this. She's trying to destroy us. Convenient, Zadkiel said quietly, that you blame the one person who isn't here to defend herself. You don't believe me. The realization struck like a physical blow. After everything, the training, the trust they'd built, the bond between them, one letter had shattered it all. I want to believe you, Zadkiel admitted, and the raw pain in his voice was worse than anger. But I've been betrayed before, Cersaya, by people I trusted, by mates who whispered love while plotting my downfall. This, he gestured to the letter, is exactly how it started last time. Cersaya felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she did the only thing she could think of. She reached for the bond, that golden thread connecting them, and threw open every wall she'd built around her heart. Look at me, she commanded, her voice steady despite the terror flooding through her. Use the bond. See the truth. Zadkiel's eyes widened slightly. What she was offering was dangerous. Complete vulnerability, every thought and feeling laid bare. If there was any deception in her, he would see it. If there was any doubt, any hidden loyalty to Draconis, it would be exposed. She felt him reach back through the bond, his power sliding into her mind like a blade. It should have been invasive, terrifying, but instead it felt like coming home. She showed him everything, her genuine shock at the letter, her absolute certainty that Eulalie had orchestrated this, and beneath it all, the bone-deep truth she'd been afraid to acknowledge even to herself. She loved him completely, irrevocably. Not the gentle love she'd once imagined with Draconis, but something fiercer, darker, more consuming. She loved him with a totality that terrified her, and the thought of losing him to Eulalie's manipulation was more painful than any rejection had ever been. Zadkiel's breath caught, and she felt his doubt crumble. He pulled her against him with almost bruising force, his face buried in her hair. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I'm sorry I doubted. I know, Cersaya whispered, holding him just as tightly. I know you've been hurt, but I'm not her. I'm not whoever betrayed you before. I'm yours, Zadkiel, completely. And I'm yours, he replied, pulling back to cup her face. Which is why I need you to stay here, behind our strongest defenses, while I end this farce of a rescue mission. No, Cersaya's voice was firm. If Eulalie is out there, and she has to be, pulling Draconis' strings, then I need to face her. I need to end this. You're not ready for war, Zadkiel argued. You've barely begun training. Then it's a good thing I'm a fast learner. Cersaya stepped back, moving to the weapon rack where Zadkiel had been teaching her sword work. She selected a blade, testing its weight. That prophecy said I'm meant to unite the packs. I can't do that hiding in a tower while you fight my battles. The alphas need to see me standing beside you. They need to see that I chose this, that I choose you. Zadkiel stared at her for a long moment, pride and fear warring in his expression. Finally, he nodded. Then we fight together, but Cersaya, his voice dropped to that dangerous purr. If you die on that battlefield, I will burn the entire realm to ash in retribution. Do you understand? Then I won't die, Cersaya said simply. I have too much to live for. As they prepared to descend to the gathering army, Cersaya caught sight of herself in the mirror. The gentle wolf was gone entirely now. In her place stood someone harder, fiercer, with glowing marks and eyes that burned with Lycan gold. She looked like a queen preparing for war. She looked like someone capable of survival. Outside, war drums echoed against the mountains, and somewhere beyond the Lycan borders, Draconis was leading his foolish rescue mission, puppet strings held tight in Eulalie's manipulative hands. But this time, Cersaya thought with grim determination, the strings were going to be cut. The battlefield was a nightmare painted in moonlight and blood. Cersaya stood on the ridge overlooking the valley where the two armies had collided, her enhanced Lycan vision allowing her to track every brutal detail. Zadkiel's forces were holding, but barely. The alpha wolves fought with desperate ferocity, and at their center, she could see Draconis himself, cutting through Lycan warriors with the skill that had made him Alpha King. Stay behind the line, Zadkiel ordered, his voice tight with the strain of battle. Blood ran from a gash across his shoulder, though he seemed barely to notice it. The plan remains. We push them back, force a surrender, and end this with minimal casualties. But Circea's attention was fixed on a figure moving through the chaos with calculated precision. Dark hair, cold eyes, wearing armor that bore the Luna's crest. Eulalie. She wasn't fighting, she was directing, pointing warriors toward strategic positions. Her lips moving in what might have been commands or something darker. "She's casting something," Circea said urgently. "Zadkiel, look!" The explosion of dark magic erupted from Eulalie's position, a wave of corrupted power that slammed into the Lycan front line. Warriors fell screaming, their bodies seizing as shadow magic ate through their defenses. It was forbidden magic, the kind that required blood sacrifice and left permanent scars on the caster's soul. Zadkiel roared in fury and pain as the magic reached him, driving him to one knee. Circea felt it through the bond. Agony, rage, and beneath it, genuine fear. Not for himself, but for her. He was trying to shield her through the bond, taking the brunt of the attack, even as it tore through him. "No," Circea breathed. Then louder, "No!" The mark on her neck ignited. It wasn't like the previous times, gentle warmth or controlled power. This was a conflagration, golden light exploding from her in a sphere that pushed back the shadow magic like dawn burning away nightmare. Every wolf and Lycan on the battlefield froze, their attention snapping to the figure now descending from the ridge. Circea walked through the carnage like a queen walking through her court. The power radiating from her made warriors on both sides step back involuntarily. Her eyes blazed pure gold, and the mark on her neck pulsed with light so bright it cast away every shadow on the field. "Eulalie," Circea called, her voice carrying with unnatural clarity. "Enough!" Her former friend's face twisted with rage, and something that might have been fear. "You should be dead. The poison should have killed you. The assassination should have ended this." "But it didn't," Circea said, still advancing. "Because you underestimated me. You always have. You thought I was weak, overlooked, easy to discard. But the only weak thing here is your desperate need to destroy what you can't have." Eulalie laughed, the sound sharp and broken. "What I can't have? You took everything from me, Circea. Draconis was supposed to be mine. His throne, his power, his kingdom. I spent years positioning myself, and you just existed, and somehow that was enough. The overlooked wolf everyone loved. Well, I'm done watching you stumble into destinies you don't deserve." She raised her hands, dark magic coalescing between them. But before she could release it, Draconis appeared, grabbing her arm. "Stop this," he commanded, his voice raw. "This isn't what we agreed." "You said we'd free her, not—" "Free her?" Eulalie spat, jerking away from him. "You fool! There was never any freeing her. This was always about elimination, about removing the obstacle between us and true power." Draconis' face went white with horrified understanding. "You lied. About everything. The letter, the claims of captivity. Of course I lied." Eulalie's control shattered completely. "Just like I've been lying since we were children. Every friendship, every confidence, every moment I spent building her trust, while waiting for the perfect chance to take what should have been mine." The confession hung in the air like poison. Around them, warriors on both sides had lowered their weapons, transfixed by the drama unfolding. Circea felt a strange, hollow ache in her chest. Not heartbreak, but the death of whatever naive hope she'd held, that Eulalie's betrayal had been impulsive rather than calculated. "You were never my friend," Circea said quietly. "Were you?" "No," Eulalie replied, and her smile was a terrible thing. "I was your rival, your enemy. And now I'm your executioner." The dark magic exploded from her hands in a lance of pure corruption aimed directly at Circea's heart. But Circea was ready. She didn't dodge. She didn't shield. Instead, she opened herself to the bond completely, channeling every ounce of power Zadkiel had been trying to teach her to control. The golden light met the shadow magic halfway and consumed it. Then Circea moved. She crossed the distance between them in a blur of supernatural speed, her hand closing around Eulalie's throat. The dark-haired woman's eyes went wide with shock as the glowing mark's power burned through her, purging the corrupted magic from her system like fire cleansing infection. "You wanted to see me weak," Circea said, her voice resonating with power that seemed to come from the earth itself. "But I was never weak, Eulalie. I was just kind, and you mistook kindness for vulnerability. That was your error." She released Eulalie, who collapsed gasping to the ground. A Around them, the alpha wolves were dropping their weapons, the fight draining out of them as they realized their Luna had orchestrated everything based on lies. Draconis stood frozen, his expression one of complete devastation. Zadkiel appeared at Circea's side, wounded but alive, his presence a solid wall of support. "What is your judgment, my queen?" he asked formally, loud enough for both armies to hear. Circea looked down at Eulalie, who was sobbing now, all her poisonous confidence shattered. Part of her wanted mercy, wanted to offer the compassion that was her nature. But a louder part, the part that had been forged in the Lycan court's brutal fires, knew that some betrayals were too fundamental to forgive. "Eulalie Sparrow," Circea pronounced, her voice carrying across the silent battlefield. "You are guilty of treason, attempted murder, and the use of forbidden magic. You are stripped of your title, your position, and your place among the packs. You will be exiled to the Deadlands, where no pack will offer you sanctuary. If you return, the sentence is death." It was harsher than execution in many ways, a lifetime of isolation, of knowing she'd destroyed herself through her own jealousy and ambition. Eulalie's scream of rage and despair echoed across the valley as guards dragged her away. Circea then turned to Draconis, who flinched under her gaze. "And you, Alpha King, you allowed yourself to be manipulated into war against people who never threatened you. Your obsession nearly cost hundreds of lives." "I know," Draconis said hoarsely. "Circea, I don't want your apologies," Circea interrupted. "I want your surrender. Acknowledge the bond between myself and King Zadkiel. Acknowledge that your rejection was final and irreversible. Swear before both armies that there will be no further challenges to our union." For a long moment, Draconis simply stared at her, this woman he'd discarded now standing before him as a true queen. Power radiating from every inch of her. Finally, slowly, he dropped to one knee. "I acknowledge the true mate bond between Queen Circea and Lycan King Zadkiel," he said, his voice carrying defeat. "I renounce any claim on her. I swear there will be no further challenges." The words sealed it. Circea felt something shift in the realm itself, as if the goddess had witnessed the oath and bound it with divine authority. The war was over before it had truly begun, ended not by superior force, but by the strength of a queen who'd finally claimed her power. As the armies began to withdraw, Zadkiel pulled Circea against him, his hand tangling in her hair. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "Terrifying and magnificent." "I had good motivation," Circea replied, her legs suddenly shaking with delayed reaction. "You were hurt." I won't lose you." "Never," Zadkiel promised. "We're bound, remember? Where I go, you follow, and where you lead, I will follow." In the distance, the moon set and dawn began to break, painting the battlefield in shades of gold that matched the light still glowing from Circea's mark. She had survived. She had proven herself. And now, finally, she could begin the real work. United the packs, healed the ancient rift, became the queen the prophecy had promised. But first, she thought as she leaned into Zadkiel's embrace, she would simply be grateful to be alive, standing beside the mate she'd chosen and who had chosen her in return. The coronation hall was ablaze with light. Every Alpha Pack leader stood on one side of the vast chamber, their finest warriors arrayed behind them in ceremonial armor. On the other side, the Lycan elders presided over their people, ancient and powerful, their expressions no longer holding the contempt they'd once directed at Circea. Between them, a path of white stone led to twin thrones carved from obsidian and silver, positioned beneath the largest moon window in the entire citadel. Circea walked that path alone, as tradition demanded. She wore a gown of midnight blue, the color of the space between starlight and shadow, with silver threading that caught the light like captured moonbeams. The glowing mark on her neck was visible to all, pulsing with steady golden light. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and on her head sat a crown forged specifically for this moment. Delicate but deadly, beautiful but unmistakably powerful. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of negotiations, treaties, and carefully orchestrated displays of united strength. The battle had ended the war, but building peace required something far more complex. Circea had met with every Alpha leader personally, demonstrating both her Lycan power and her Alpha heritage, proving herself as the bridge the prophecy had promised. Some had accepted her readily, others had required more persuasive demonstrations. Now, as she reached the dais, where Zadkiel waited, she felt the weight of every eye in the chamber. This wasn't just a coronation. It was a declaration that the old ways were ending, and something new was beginning. Circea Wren, Elder Moira's voice rang out, formal and ceremonial. You have been tested by blood, by battle, and by the sacred bond of the goddess herself. You have proven yourself worthy of the Lycan throne. Do you accept the responsibility of queen? Do you swear to protect both Lycan and Alpha, to bridge the divide that has separated our people for 3 centuries? I do, Circea said, her voice steady and clear. I swear it on the bond I share with my mate, on the blood of my ancestors, and on my own life. I will be the bridge. I will be the shield. I will be the queen this realm needs. Then kneel, Zadkiel commanded, stepping forward. His own crown gleamed silver and dark in the moonlight, and his golden eyes held fierce pride as he looked down at her. Circea knelt and felt Zadkiel's hand rest gently on her head. Power flooded through the touch, his acceptance, his claim, and beneath it, something that had grown between them over the weeks of battle and negotiation. Love, real, consuming, dangerous love that acknowledged both their darkness and their light. Rise, Queen Circea, Zadkiel said, his voice resonating through the chamber. My mate, my equal, my forever. She rose, and the hall erupted in a roar of approval that shook the ancient stones. Lycans and Alphas together, their voices unified for the first time in living memory. Circea turned to face them, standing beside Zadkiel, and felt the prophecy's weight finally lift. She had done it, she had united them. But there was still one final piece of business to complete. Bring forward the prisoner, Circea commanded, her voice cutting through the celebration. The hall fell silent as guards escorted Draconis into the chamber. He was in chains, silver binding his alpha power, and he looked like a shadow of the proud king who'd once rejected her. 3 weeks of imprisonment had carved hollows into his face, and his eyes held the dull ache of a man who'd lost everything through his own foolishness. He was brought before the thrones and forced to his knees. Circea descended the dais steps slowly, studying the man who'd once held her heart. She felt nothing but a distant pity now. The girl who'd loved him was dead, replaced by someone far stronger. Alpha King Draconis Sanguine, Circea said formally, you have been found guilty of inciting war based on false pretenses, of allowing yourself to be manipulated into nearly destroying diplomatic relations between Lycan and Alpha territories, and of breaking sacred mate bond laws through your rejection and subsequent obsession. What say you in your defense? Draconis lifted his head, meeting her eyes. Nothing, he said quietly. I have no defense. I was a fool. I discarded the greatest treasure the goddess ever gave me, and I deserve whatever punishment you deem fit. Circea studied him for a long moment. Part of her, the compassionate part that had saved young Mira from execution, wanted to offer mercy. But she was queen now, and mercy without justice was weakness. Your title as Alpha King is stripped, Circea pronounced. Your pack will choose new leadership under the guidance of the council. You will be banished from these territories for a period of 10 years. During that time, you will live as a lone wolf, without pack, without position, without power. If you use this time to reflect and grow, you may petition for return at the decade's end. If you return before then, or if you ever again threaten the peace between our peoples, the sentence is death. Do you accept this judgment? I do, Draconis said, his voice breaking. Thank you, He caught himself. Your Majesty, you are more merciful than I deserve. As guards led him away, Circea felt Zadkiel's hand settle on her shoulder. Mercy again, he murmured, though his tone held approval rather than criticism. You could have executed him. I could have, Circea agreed. But he was as much Eulalie's victim as her weapon, and I want him to live with the knowledge of what he lost. Death would be too easy. My queen grows ruthless, Zadkiel observed, and she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. I approve. The celebration continued late into the night. Circea moved through the crowds, accepting congratulations from Lycan elders who'd once wanted her dead and Alpha leaders who'd once seen her as weak. She was neither the overlooked wolf nor the terrified prisoner anymore. She was queen, acknowledged by all, feared by some, respected by most. Later, much later, when the last guests had finally departed and the halls had fallen silent, Zadkiel found her standing on the balcony, overlooking the mountains. The moon was full again, casting silver light across the realm she now ruled beside him. "Regrets?" he asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "None," Circea said honestly, leaning back against his chest. "This is where I was always meant to be, with you, leading our people, building something better than what came before." "The prophecy is fulfilled," Zadkiel murmured against her hair. "You've united the packs, ended the separation, become exactly what the goddess intended." "We fulfilled it," Circea corrected, turning in his arms. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. Your protection, your faith, your love." Something vulnerable flashed in Zadkiel's golden eyes. "I love you, Circea. Possessively, absolutely, sometimes dangerously. I will never let you go. I will never stop being jealous and territorial and far too protective." "Good," Circea said, reaching up to trace the scar near his eye. "Because I love you the same way. You're mine, Zadkiel, my mate, my king, my forever. And I'm not the gentle wolf anymore, who'd be afraid of that kind of consuming love. I'm your queen, and I'll fight just as fiercely to keep you as you would to keep me." Zadkiel kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of dark promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing with power and desire, and something that might have been reverence. "Then let us reign together, my queen. Let us build an empire that will last 1,000 years. Let us show the realm what happens when the goddess binds two souls who refuse to be separated." "Yes," Circea agreed, and the mark on her neck flared brilliantly, sealing the vow between them with light that could be seen from every corner of the citadel. Below them, their combined peoples celebrated. Above them, the moon shone down in approval, and between them, the bond burned eternal, fierce and unbreakable, dark and light intertwined, a love story written in power and blood, and the unwavering certainty that they had found in each other exactly what they needed. Circea Wren was no longer the rejected wolf. She was queen. She was powerful. She was loved. And her reign, standing beside the Lycan king who'd claimed her the moment everyone else had cast her aside, would be remembered for generations as the beginning of a new age. An age of unity, an age of strength, an age where the overlooked became legendary, and love, dark, possessive, all-consuming love, proved stronger than any betrayal, any rejection, any force that tried to tear it apart. She had survived. She had conquered. She had become. And this was only the beginning. Thank you for listening.